LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
ESPS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning. It's Sunday, January 24th, and we're here at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 10 a.m. Eastern Time launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. My name is Andy Tran, and I'm a production supervisor here at SpaceX. Welcome to the webcast for SpaceX's Transporter-1 mission. It's our first dedicated small-sat rideshare program launch and third launch of 2021. If you joined us yesterday, you know we scrubbed for weather, specifically for the surface electricity field rule. Today's weather has also been a bit challenging, but we're currently looking good for our T0 liftoff time. On board this mission are 133 commercial and government spacecraft, in addition to 10 Starlink satellites, the most spacecraft ever deployed on a single mission. This count includes CubeSats, microsats, and 2 orbital transfer vehicles, sometimes called space tugs, which will deploy their spacecraft after separating from Falcon 9. SpaceX created the SmallSat rideshare program to provide small satellite operators with competitive pricing, increased flight opportunities, flexibility, and most importantly, a ride to space on SpaceX's Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, as well as Starship in the not-too-distant future. For more details on our rideshare program or to reserve your spot, head over to our website at spacex.com/rideshare. Now let's take a look at Falcon 9 out on the pad at the Cape. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9, our 70-meter, 2-stage liquid fueled launch vehicle. Today's mission is the 5th flight for this particular booster. Its first 4 flights were all in 2020, which included our Crew Dragon Demo 2 mission for NASA in May, the Anasis 2 mission in July, a Starlink mission in October, and most recently, CRS-21 in December. You can tell by the re-entry soot at the bottom of the vehicle that this booster has flown before. That bottom 2/3 of the vehicle is the first stage. Its objective is to accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere into space and then separate from the rest of the rocket. From there, it will make its way back to Earth and target a landing on a recovery vessel. Of course, I Still Love You. There she is on screen. On top of the first stage is the black carbon fiber inner stage. This composite material houses the larger nozzle of the second stage engine. And then on top of the inner stage is the Falcon 9 second stage, which will take the payload to its eventual destination in orbit. After the first stage separates about 2.5 minutes into flight, the second stage will then carry the 143 spacecraft to orbit. In order to get to the intended orbit today, we'll need to light our second stage twice before deploying all of our payloads. And at the top of the rocket, you'll notice a large nose cone. This is called the fairing. It's a composite structure and protects the rocket from the forces of ascent and also houses our payloads. Once the vehicle is outside of the Earth's atmosphere, the fairing separates to expose the satellites to space. For today's mission, both fairings halves are brand new, and our recovery vessel, Miss Chief, will be attempting to recover the fairing halves from the water following landing. And finally, the large truss structure next to Falcon 9 is called the Transporter Erector. We also refer to it as the TE. Its job is to roll Falcon 9 out to the launch pad, raise it to a vertical launch position, and also route power, fluids, and communication to the rocket and satellite. It will retract away from the rocket slightly around the T-minus 4.5 minute mark, providing clearance for Falcon 9 to lift off. The chief engineer held a technical poll at the T-minus 1 hour mark, and the launch director held a propellant load and launch go-no-go poll at the T-minus 38 minute mark. Weather is still tracking to be green for a T0 liftoff. Falcon 9 has been loading propellants since the T-minus 35 minute mark. The vehicle uses a refined form of kerosene called RP1 for its fuel and super chilled liquid oxygen, or LOX, as its oxidizer. Currently, RP1 is fully loaded on the second stage and nearly fully loaded on the first stage. Liquid oxygen is currently loading and currently underway on both stages. As for helium, it began loading before the webcast went live and will continue to top off until about 1.5 minutes before launch. We use helium as a pressurant as the propellants are pulled out by the engine pumps. In about a minute, around T-minus 7 minutes, engine chilling will begin. This is where we allow a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen to flow into the Merlin engine turbo pumps prior to the full flow of LOX to avoid any thermal shocks to the system. Checkouts of the second stage thrust vector control actuators will also be underway. This is known as the engine wiggle test. We move the thrust chamber slightly to make sure that the guidance hardware is a go for flight. The first stage actually does the same test, but it happens just seconds before ignition. So far, the vehicle is healthy. We are currently working no issues. The range is standing by and currently green for launch. And again, weather is a tracking item, but right now we are green for T0 liftoff time. We are currently 7 minutes from liftoff. Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. In about 2 minutes, the Transporter-Rector will start to retract away and enter its pre-launch position about 2 degrees from the rocket. At liftoff, hydraulics will move it to a position about 45 degrees away from the rocket. Again, around the T-minus 4.5 minute mark, you'll hear some hiss and pop, and that's pressure venting from the rocket and the plumbing of the Transporter-Erector. The vehicle remains in good health. We're continuing to load propellant on both the first and second stages. You can see that we've had some gaseous oxygen venting from Falcon 9. About a minute before liftoff, you'll hear the announcement that Falcon 9 is in startup, which means that the rocket's own internal flight computers are now autonomously controlling the launch countdown. The payload inside the fairing halves continue to be healthy. The Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather, again, is a tracking item for us, but currently we're green. And as a reminder, if we don't launch today, we'll make another attempt sometime in the future, and we'll let you know as soon as we know that date. And as I mentioned earlier, today's launch is the first of SpaceX's dedicated small-sat rideshare program, which provides small satellite operators with competitive pricing and increased flight opportunities on board the world's most advanced and proven launch vehicles. As part of the program, we also offer traditional rideshare opportunities on existing low Earth orbit missions and on SpaceX's Starlink missions, which launch about once a month. Traditionally, it's pretty hard to find affordable space on a rocket for a small satellite. Our rideshare program groups small sats together, making it easier to purchase a less expensive ticket to orbit on a predictable schedule. And unlike traditional rideshare opportunities, our rideshare missions are not dependent on a primary payload. Our missions are pre-scheduled and will not be held up by delays with co-passengers. So that means that if you're ready to fly during the scheduled launch period, you will fly. Since we announced the program, we have launched 4 rideshare missions, including 2 Starlink missions with Planet on board, 1 Starlink mission with spaceflight riding along, as well as the SAOCOM 1B mission. And in fact, one of these customers flew less than 6 months after their contract with SpaceX, which is a pretty remarkable turnaround time. We're really excited for today's mission, not only because it's the first dedicated rideshare, but because it will also be the most spacecraft ever deployed on a single mission. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to the more than 130 small satellites on board for our commercial and government customers, we have 10 Starlink satellites of our own riding along. And as many of you may know, Starlink is a constellation of satellites that can provide high-speed, low-latency internet all over the globe, particularly in remote or rural areas where connectivity is limited or completely unavailable. The 10 Starlink satellites launching aboard this mission will also be the first Starlink satellites deployed to a polar orbit, and many of the future Starlink sats flying to the polar orbit will actually launch from our Vandenberg site here in California. The Vandenberg team is hiring for a number of open positions to support our growing operations there. If you're interested in working on the launch team that will help all kinds of payloads launch from our West Coast facility, head over to spacex.com/careers and apply. We are about 3 minutes from liftoff. Falcon 9 is moving into the final stages of the countdown. The payload and vehicle remain healthy, and we're still currently tracking weather to be green for a T0 liftoff at 10 a.m. Eastern. In about 30 seconds, around the T-minus 2 minute mark, we should finish liquid oxygen loading, and that will wrap up the final propellant loading for Falcon 9. For those just joining us, this is the Transporter-1 mission for SpaceX, the third launch of 2021 and the first dedicated small-sat rideshare mission for SpaceX. And we just heard the call that LOX loading is completed. Again, that is the last of propellant loading for Falcon 9. And on screen, you can start to see some white clouds forming around Falcon 9. That is normal and expected for us at this stage in the countdown. That is liquid oxygen condensing as it meets the warmer ambient temperatures of the Florida air.
Falcon 9's in startup.
And the vehicle is in startup. Both stages are beginning to pressurize for launch. In a few seconds here, we should be hearing the launch director give the final go for liftoff.
LD on countdown 1, go for launch.
And there you heard it. That is the final go for launch at T-minus 35 seconds. All systems are go for the Transporter-1 mission. Let's listen and watch in as we lift off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Impulse pitching downrange.
Stage 1 chamber pressure is nominal.
We are T plus 43 seconds into flight. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower and is currently throttling down to prepare for max Q at around the T plus 1 minute and 12 second mark. Max Q is where the vehicle will experience the highest amount of aerodynamic pressures.
Falcon 9 is supersonic. Max Q.
And we've just passed max Q. That is a really cool tracking shot of Falcon 9. All is looking good with the stage 1 trajectory. In about a minute, we have 3 events coming up in quick succession. First up is main engine cutoff. That's where the 9 engines on the first stage will shut off, followed by stage separation, where the first and second stages will separate from one another. Shortly after that, we'll have second engine start 1. The Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite its engine and continue its journey into orbit.
MVAC engine chill has begun.
We're about 20 seconds away from main engine cutoff, the start of those 3 events happening in rapid succession.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
Coming up in a few seconds, we should have the fairing deploy.
MVAC ignition.
Bearing separation confirmed.
And there you can see the 2 fairing halves have separated and fallen away from the vehicle, exposing the 143 spacecraft to the vacuum of space. And as a reminder, our recovery vessel, Miss Chief, will be attempting to recover the fairing halves today from the water. We're at T plus 3 minutes and 30 seconds into flight. We have a couple of views on screen right now. On the right-hand side is a view of the second stage, specifically the MVAC engine. It's currently in the first of its 2 MVAC burns. This burn should last for about another 5 minutes or so. And on the left-hand side of the screen is a view from the top of our first stage looking down. The next milestone for the first stage will be its re-entry burn. Falcon 9 needs to execute an entry burn to slow itself down before hitting the dense parts of the atmosphere. Without this burn, relying on the atmosphere alone to slow Falcon 9 down will put unnecessary strain on the rocket. And that entry burn is coming up at around the T plus 7 minute and 47 minute mark, just a few minutes from now. For those just joining us, this is the Transporter-1 mission for SpaceX, the first dedicated small-sat rideshare program mission, and it's also the 3rd mission of 2021. We're just waiting on the next major event for this mission, which is the first stage entry burn. That's going to be happening around the T plus 7 minute and 47 mark. You can see some periodic bursts of gas from the first stage. That is nitrogen from our attitude control systems. They help to orient the first stage as it continues to make its descent back towards Earth. And as we get closer to the Earth, you'll start to notice those honeycomb-like structures on the left-hand side of your screen start to move and pivot. Those are our hypersonic grid fins, and those help to steer the first stage back as it returns back to Earth. As for the second stage, impact performance looks nominal. just a few seconds after we finish the stage 1 entry burn, we'll be shutting off the second stage Merlin vacuum engine and enter a small coast phase. Again, we'll need to relight this engine later on in the mission to get to our eventual destination in orbit.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
We are about 45 seconds away from that stage 1 entry burn. For the entry burn, it is a 3-engine burn, so 3 of the 9 Merlin engines on the first stage will relight and start to slow the stage down before it hits the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And there's the entry burn. 3 of the 9 Merlin engines have relit. This burn is expected to last for about 30 seconds.
Second stage and terminal guidance.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
And you can see on screen the entry burn has concluded, and in just a few seconds we should be hearing the call out for second engine cutoff, where we'll shut down the second stage MVAC engine.
FTS is saved.
There's the second stage.
Also signal stage 1, Cape expected.
The second stage has shut down its engine. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be attempting to recover the booster for a 5th time.
Nominal parking orbit insertion.
On our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. The first stage has one more burn left, the landing burn, and it begins just before we touch down and provides the booster with a soft descent before we land. That should be starting up anytime now. And we did get confirmation of the second stage that it did reach a good parking orbit.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
LOS stage 2, Cape Canaveral expected.
And Falcon 9 returns safely once again. That is the 5th time for this particular booster and the 73rd recovery of an orbital class rocket. Great way to start off the mission and a great way to start off the Sunday. We're now going to coast for the next 45 minutes or so while we wait for SES-2, or second engine start number 2. We're going to leave you with an animation that shows you where we're at in the coast phase, and we'll see you back here at the T plus 54 minute mark. Welcome back to the Transporter-1 mission. If you're just joining us, Falcon 9 lifted off at 10 a.m. Eastern from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, had successful stage separation. We landed our first stage on our drone ship for the 5th time and successfully completed our first second stage burn. On screen right now is a view of the second stage MVAC engine. We are waiting to relight that engine for the second and final burn. This burn will be a quick one, lasting only 2 seconds. And we're expecting that burn to start in just a few seconds here. And if we don't have footage of it, we should be able to get confirmation over the nets. And there is second engine startup and then cut off. Now we're waiting for confirmation of a good orbit on that second stage.
Nominal payload orbit insertion.
And there's the call out that we want. That is a confirmation of a good orbit. Next up will be the deployment of our 133 spacecraft on board the mission, which will occur over an 18-minute period. And as a reminder, today's mission is the first dedicated small-sat rideshare program mission. We created this program to provide small satellite operators with regularly scheduled rides on board Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and in the not-too-distant future, Starship as well. These missions offer competitive pricing to our customers, as well as increased flight opportunities and flexibility. As part of this program, we're also offering traditional rideshare opportunities on existing low Earth orbit missions and on SpaceX's Starlink missions, which provide launch opportunities about once a month. The first of those deployments should be happening around the T+ 58-minute and 30-second mark. There's a view of the Transporter-1 payload containing all 143 spacecraft. For today's ride shares, there are 11 ports on our payload adapter responsible for sending 133 spacecraft plus our 10 Starlink satellites into orbit. Some of these ports will have multiple deployments. For these, over the countdown nets, we'll hear callouts for when the deployment sequence has begun and another callout for when the deployment sequence has completed. There are also then a handful of ports that will deploy only once, and we'll try to let you know who the customer is for each deployment, along with how many spacecraft are being sent into space. We're just over a minute away from the first set of deployments. Due to the nature of the payload stack, we will not have visuals for every deployment, but we do hope to catch most of them with our 2-camera views. It's also worth noting that we will lose access to ground station coverage for a short period during the 18-minute deployment sequence, and when we reach that point, we'll let you know over the webcast. First up, the deployment sequences for port C4 and C1 will be initiated at the T+ 58-minute and 30-second mark. On port C4, there are 36 Planet SuperDoves, and then there are 17 spacecraft aboard Kepler's port on port C1. And we're hoping to get
Ports C4 and C1 deployment sequences initiated.
those callouts. The deployment sequence has started for 36 of Planet's SuperDoves on port C4, as well as the 17 spacecraft aboard Kepler's port on C1. We're expecting these deployments to conclude about 11 minutes from now. In just a few seconds, we should be starting up the deployment for our customer Maverick, which contains 3 CubeSats for NASA's Small Spacecraft Technology Program's VR-3X mission. It's going to be deploying from the aft end fuel dome, which essentially is a small platform mounted on the back end of the second stage fuel dome, right above the MVAC engine.
Aft end payload deployed.
And there you heard the callouts. 3 CubeSats aboard Maverick's Mercury dispenser have deployed. These are for NASA's Small Spacecraft Technologies Program VR-3X mission. The next callout will be to start deployment sequence for our customer NanoRacks around the T+1 hour and 8-minute mark. And while we wait for this deployment sequence to begin, we're going to leave you with views of the deployments for Planet and Kepler. And we'll see you back here at the T+1 hour and 7-minute mark.
Also signal reef expected.
Welcome back to the webcast for Transporter-1, SpaceX's first dedicated smallsat rideshare program mission. On board this mission are 143 spacecraft, the most spacecraft ever deployed on a single mission. If you're just joining us, Falcon 9 had an on-time liftoff at 10 a.m. Eastern from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It followed a nominal trajectory after liftoff. The first stage landed for the 5th time on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, and our second stage had 2 successful engine burns. So far, the deployment sequence has begun for 36 of Planet's CubeSats, as well as the 17 spacecraft aboard Kepler's port. If you're looking closely at the left half of your screen, you should see them in the background being deployed from the payload. We're expecting those to be completed around the T+1 hour and 9-minute mark. We've also deployed 3 CubeSats for our customer Maverick. We're now waiting to hear that the deployment sequence has started from port C3 for the 9 spacecraft for NanoRac's EAR-1 mission. And while we're waiting for that call out, the white dot on the left-hand side of your screen, that is the moon. It's pretty cool shots of the moon there. And there goes another satellite. Again, we're waiting for confirmation from the team for the 9 spacecraft for NanoRac's EAR-1 mission. And there's the confirmation for the 9 spacecraft. We're expecting to get confirmation that these have completed deployment in about 8 minutes from now once we pass through our ground station blackout period, so stay tuned for that.
Also signal Bangalore as expected.
Next up, we're expecting to get the confirmation that the 36 of Planet's Super Doves have deployed, as well as the 17 spacecraft aboard Kepler's port. And we did get that call out. So far, we've successfully deployed 56 of our 133 smallsat rideshares today. 9 spacecrafts have started their deployment sequence and should wrap up in the next few minutes, leaving another 68 still yet to be initiated. We've now entered that blackout period I mentioned earlier, which means we lose camera views and telemetry. During this time, we are expecting quite a bit of activity, but we won't get confirmation of successful deployments until we regain ground station connectivity around the T+1 hour and 15-minute mark. Here's a preview of what will be happening until we regain that connectivity. 9 spacecraft for NanoRacks will complete their deployment sequence. The first of 2 ports for our customer ExoLaunch will start and then finish deploying from port B3. Their second port, B2, will also begin its deploy sequence, but won't be completed until approximately T+1 hour and 16 minutes. ExoLaunch has a total of 30 spacecraft on today's mission. From there, 2 spacecraft will deploy for our customer Capella from 2 separate ports. And lastly, Spaceflight Incorporated customer IQPS's satellite will also separate. And while we wait to regain access to ground station coverage in a few minutes, sit back and follow along with our animation that shows you where we're at in the mission. We'll see you back here at the T+1 hour and 15-minute mark. And welcome back once again to the Transporter-1 mission. We're in the middle of deploying 133 small sats for commercial and government customers. We're expecting to reconnect with the ground station in just a few seconds, and we should be hearing callouts for the deployments that we didn't see, and these callouts should be happening back-to-back once we reconnect. During this blackout period, we also were able to recover both fairing halves, and they are safely on board our ships. And the callouts for the satellites should be happening around the T+1 hour and 1 hour, 15 minutes and 50-second mark.
Acquisition signal, Cordova.
Deployments confirmed on ports C3, B3, C5, B1, and C6. Port B2 deployment sequence initiated and confirmed.
So we did get some confirmations. We should have some more callouts happening in just a few seconds here, and I'll summarize once all of the callouts are done.
Port A4 deployment confirmed. Port A2 deployment confirmed. Port B2 deployment sequence complete.
It sounds like we've gotten all the callouts. I'm going to go ahead and recap all of the different ports. So from port C3, the NanoRacks EAR-Ease 1 mission's 9 payloads have deployed. From port B3 and B2, the Exoport-1 spacecraft deployed with 2 ICE-I radar imaging satellites aboard, and Exoport-2 with 28 spacecraft from the DLR ICE-I Nanoavionics Swarm and TU Dresden began its deployment. From port C5 and C6, deployed 1 small sat each for our customer Capella. From port B1, the Spaceflight Incorporated customer's IQPS satellite has also deployed. And from port A4, SpaceX Spaceflight Incorporated's Sherpa FX-1 spacecraft has deployed with its 13 spacecraft on board. From port B2, the final small sats for EXO launch have now deployed, making for a total of 30 on today's mission. And from port A2, D-Orbit's Pulse mission with its 20 spacecraft on board has also deployed. And that will conclude the rideshare portion of the mission. With these deployments behind us, we are now going to enter another short coast phase before deploying our 10 Starlink satellites. So sit tight, enjoy the music, and we'll be back at the T+1 hour and 30-minute mark. We'll see you then.
Acquisition of signal, Pogo.
Also signals 12 art, as expected. Acquisition of signal, New Hampshire.
Welcome back to the webcast for SpaceX's Transporter-1 mission. If you're just joining us, we are close to the end of today's mission, which launched this morning from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida at 10 a.m. Eastern. We then had 2 successful ignitions and shutdown of the second stage Merlin vacuum engine, then successful deployment of our 133 spacecraft for our commercial and government customers. We were also able to successfully recover our first stage for a 5th time on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, and recover both fairing halves from the water. Coming up, we'll have the deployment of our 10 Starlink satellites. It's going to be the first set of Starlink satellites deployed to a polar orbit, and that should be happening in about 30 seconds. And there's a view of the second stage. That right there is a view of the Starlink satellites to the right-hand side. It looks like we lost a signal on the second stage. Hopefully we can get that back. If we don't have views of the second stage, we should get confirmation via the callouts of deployments of those Starlink satellites.
Expected. Partial data back from New Hampshire.
And there goes the 10 Starlink satellites, the first set to go to a polar orbit. With those 10, that is 143 spacecraft deployed on a single mission, the most ever. Pretty awesome. With that said, that will be bringing our webcast to an end. We would like to thank all of our rideshare customers for their support on today's mission. We'd also like to thank the United States Air Force for range support, as well as the Federal Aviation Administration for licensing. Continue to follow us on SpaceX.com for future missions and milestones, as well as our Twitter and Instagram profiles. And if you are excited about what you've seen today and want to join our team, visit SpaceX.com/careers to learn more about working at SpaceX. Thank you to all of our viewers for your continued support, and have a wonderful rest of the day.